Assalamu alaikum everyone. This is Azhar Imran from Kips CSS with our e-learning lecture series. I'm going to talk about today current affair because I teach current affair and international relations at Kips for CSS students. So we're going to talk about current affair in our today's lecture. So it's one of the most important subjects of CSS, and there are a lot of students who face fundamental problems with respect to how to cover the course outline of the CSS, because course outlines are generally designed. There are no specific topics, but there are some general ideas about the topics of the current affairs. So if you look at the last couple of years papers, the students have to face a lot of challenging questions despite having very good preparation. So we are going to talk about in our three segments how to tackle the problem of the current affair. As a teacher of current affairs, been engaged in teaching from last 3 or 4 years, I am going to broadly divide my lecture with respect to preparation of current affair into three broader structures. The first structure in which we are going to talk about, and we are going to do a content analysis of the current affairs course outline. For example, if you look at the current affairs course outline, there are three broader segments of the three broader course outlines of the current affair for CSS students. The first part of the current affair course outline comprises of Pakistan's domestic issues, which again, as I said earlier, has been given a very general ideas about the topics that we have to prepare. Pakistan's domestic issues involve political issues, economic issues, and of course social and cultural issues. The second part of the current affair course outline comprises of Pakistan's foreign relations, which are broadly more specific, that we have to study at least Pakistan's foreign relations with 5 major and most important states throughout the history of Pakistan that Pakistan have dealt with respect to our foreign relations. That involves, of course, the West, and Pakistan got independence in the post-World War context. So eventually when we talk about West, it was the rise of America as a world power. So West mean our relationship with, primarily our relationship with United States of America. And how did this relationship have been gone through ups and downs over the period of three different historical developments of our relationship with America. The first from 1947 to 1991, the Cold War period, then second, the post-Cold War period till 9/11, and then post 9/11, and right now, as we have seen in last week the peace deal between Afghan Taliban and American government under President Trump. So what is going to have the impact of this peace deal on the future relation of Pakistan and America? And then of course Pakistan's perhaps most important relationship throughout its history has been its strategic partner, popularly known as relationship deeper than seas and higher than Himalayas. Of course, I'm talking about China. So in the context of China as emerging 21st century economic power and potential military conflict with America, it has a lot of strategic relationship and reshaping of its strategic relationship in the context of post-2013 OBOR and CPEC, of course. So China-Pakistan Economic Corridor is one of the most important project of OBOR. So then of course we move to the India, which is of course our neighbor on Eastern Front. We have had history of conflicts, and still in the recent time, the way the Modi government has brought some constitutional political changes and transitions into the state and legal and political structure of the Kashmir, it has certainly again put a huge challenge to Pakistan's foreign policy, but of course it has broadly has put some challenges to the regional security policy as well. Then of course we move into the Pakistan's relationship with, of course, Afghanistan, and Afghanistan has been very important to Pakistan because of its common history, shared border, ethnic issues, lot of issues with respect to trade, and then of course Pakistan's involvement in Afghanistan's internal political affairs since the Saur revolution, and then Afghan jihad against Soviet Union, and then of course formation of the Taliban government, and then post 9/11 Pakistan's again alliance with America against the Taliban regime under the war on terror umbrella, and how Pakistan is going to play an important role in the changing scenario of Afghan peace deal, where Pakistan has been accused and has been facing a challenge between its support to the Taliban American negotiations, but of course the reservations coming from the Afghan government. So this is primarily Pakistan's foreign relations. But of course, last topic that we discussed in Pakistan foreign policy is perhaps the most important one that has always been very core to Pakistan foreign relations, that is Pakistan's relation with the Muslim world. So if we look at the Pakistan's relation with the Muslim world, we can broadly classify Pakistan's relation with the Muslim world into two structures. And during the Cold War time period, our relationship dominated primarily with Saudi Arabia, with Iran, with Turkey and Pakistan being part of SEATO and CENTO. And then in the contemporary context, of course, Pakistan is witnessing or trying, at least under the Imran government, to create a new form of Muslim power alliance, that what we commonly called in media the M5: Pakistan, Iran, Qatar, Turkey, and of course Malaysia, the new entry. So what is going to have this relationship of emerging M5 bloc? What is going to be the impact of the emerging M5 bloc on Pakistan's traditional Muslim relationship with Iran and Saudi Arabia, primarily with the Gulf states and the Gulf Sunni monarchies, and of course the Saudi Arabia is a leader of that, and how this new emerging potential M5 alliance will change Pakistan's dependency on the Saudi Arabia and of course the Gulf monarchies, but also at the same time how it would be viewed and seen by its traditional Western alliances, particularly America, which has been very much to the conflict with Iran since the Iranian Revolution, but most importantly in the recent Middle East crisis, it has been in conflict with the Turkey as well. It has been some security issues with Malaysia as well. It has been some disagreements with Qatar as well in the recent Syrian civil war, and of course we have seen Pakistan and America are having some problem in the context of the CPAC, and Pakistan's getting more closer to the China as a strategic partner in the context of China's OBR projects. Then we move on to perhaps one of the most important issue, and one of the most important part of the CSS is international affair, or what we call the global issues. So there is a list of the global issues. If I could read one by one, there's a list of the topics comprising of the global issues, which is 60% of your CSS and current affair. Why I'm saying that this is the heart and the brain of your current affair, but there is a list of at least 12 to 13 topics comprising of global issues. But let me talk about why these topics are not only important for your current affair, but also for other subjects as well. For example, if you look at the topics of the current affair CSS known as international issues or global issues, are extremely important not only for your current affair preparation, but also for potentially your preparation for writing a good comprehensive analytical essay for the CSS. Why? Because if you look at the past 3 or 4 years CSS essay papers, most of the current affair essay paper have at least 3 to 4 topics out of current affairs. Even if you look at the 2020 CS exam, at least there were 4 to 5 topics which were asked to write an essay which came from the current affair. So current affair is extremely important not only for your CSS current affair paper, but also for your CSS essay preparation in terms of content and knowledge. And among the current affair, the global issues are the most important one, because it is a 60% of your CSS current affair paper, and secondly its relevancy with many of the other subjects, even with Pakistan affairs, with CSS essay and many of the other subjects. So if we look at the current affair international issues or global issues, they're very generic topic. For example, Middle East crisis. So Middle East has been in crisis since the Cold War period, then in the post-Cold War period, then the 9/11, and then of course in the context of Arab Spring. So what do we mean by Middle East? So how many topics we have to cover in the Middle East? What needs to be studied in the Middle East? What are the different dimensions of the conflict? What are the regional players fighting in the Middle East against each other? And what are their interests? For example, Iran versus Saudi Arabia, Turkey versus, Islamist of ISIS, and the Kurdish issue. What is the role of Israel and the Palestinian conflict in the Middle East between Palestine and Israel, the role of America, the role of Europe, and of course the re-emerging role of Russia and the emerging role of China in the context of that, and how these all conflicts within the regions are going to be aggravated by the President Trump's withdrawal in 2018 from the JCPOA, Joint Comprehensive Plan of Actions, the Iranian nuclear program. So all these things have to be studied in the context of covering the Middle East. Then of course there could be as many questions with respect to Middle East as many are the topics. So if we want to cover that, we don't need to have only a simplistic understanding of the idea of what Middle East is. We need to look at the history, we need to look at economic and political importance, the geographic, what we call the geostrategic importance of the Middle East, and of course the role of regional players and international players in this conflict. Unless and until we understand, we cannot prepare ourselves for hot current affair topic as long as the Middle East is concerned. Similarly, if we move into the next topic, which is global energy politics, so primarily the global energy politics, again, very general topic. So at least there are 3 or 4 different dimensions if we want to prepare the global energy politics, purely from exam point of view. One, the role of global energy in global economy and global politics, and those states who have the resources of the production of the global energy, how they're going to impact the power politics and power economy of international affairs, and then the policies of these states and resistance by these states, and of course those MNCs who buy oil and gas for the production of energy resources from these states, how they are going to influence and resist, of course, the policies with respect to sustainable environment, and how this global energy politics has a contradictory conflict with movements for climate protection, environment change, or what we broadly call the environmental politics. So this is one perspective. Then we move into the regional perspective of the global energy politics. For example, 2 of the most important projects in the Asia are known as TAPI, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India gas pipeline, and the second is IPI, Iran, Pakistan, India gas pipeline, which are which were considered back in first decade of the 20th century when the initial proposal came about, are going to revolutionize the economics and politics of this region, creating millions of jobs and of course trade activities. But because of the geopolitics of regional conflicts and global powers interests, it has still remained a pipe dream. So we will be talking about that, because in the exam point of view, if we look from the previous paper point of view, these are the 2 questions that have been asked. And then of course at the end, the 4th part is that how the conflicts between some of the global power policies per se, let's America and China, is being shaped out in terms of global energy politics, because America has leading multinational corporations who are involved in trade of the global energy politics, and China being one of the world leaders in need of global energy for its growing and expanding industrialization. Of course, with OBR in the pipeline, China certainly is going to have more and more energy needs. So these are the broader context that we have to discuss, because the questions in the exam has been asked from one of these perspectives. And then of course we move on to another important topic of current affair, that is global warming and what broadly called the environmental politics. So when we talk about the global warming and climate change, it seemed a very simple topic, but it is not the case. We have to look at least 3 or 4 different perspectives to understand this topic. First, we need to look at the history and historical debates that have taken place with respect to global environment and global warming and climate change. And then, of course, we have to look at different international legal regimes that have been at a different period of times signed by the different parties, what we call COPs, the Conference of the Parties, with respect to ensuring the sustainable ecology and environment. And last but not least, the recent development is the Paris agreements, and after the American withdrawal from the Paris agreements, many of the analysts have the opinion that the dream of a sustainable environment is facing a huge threat, because America being the leading economy and one of the leading, of course, emitter of the carbon dioxides and greenhouse gases, which are causing the global warming, a threat for the world peace and stability as long as our future is concerned. So before we move on, I am going to talk about some of these topics in my next class.